Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling strangely smaller than when you walked in? Nothing dramatic happened. No one yelled, no one insulted you. And yet, something inside you feels off. You replay the moment in your head while driving home, maybe while brushing your teeth, maybe late at night, staring at the ceiling. You ask yourself the same quiet questions again and again. Did I say something wrong? Why do I feel guilty? Am I just overthinking this? And here's the unsettling part. You're a thoughtful person. You listen. You care. You try to be fair. So when that heavy feeling shows up, your first instinct isn't to blame anyone else. It's to blame yourself. This happens to people every day in places that look completely normal on the outside. At work, after a short meeting that somehow leaves you apologizing. In a relationship, after you say, I can't, and immediately feel like you did something cruel. Even with family, where love exists, but peace somehow doesn't. What if I told you that feeling confused, drained, or quietly guilty is not a personality flaw? What if it's not because you're too sensitive, too nice, or bad at confrontation? What if that feeling is actually information? Most people are taught how to be polite. Very few are taught how to protect their inner world. And when no one teaches you that skill, you don't notice when your sense of self slowly starts shrinking. You just know that being around certain people makes you doubt yourself, while being around others makes you feel steady and clear. In the next few minutes, I want to help you see something most people miss. Not by attacking anyone, not by turning you cold or defensive, but by helping you recognize what's happening inside you and why that matters more than anything else. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that awareness alone can change how you move through every relationship in your life. Let's start there. When good people start believing the problem is them, that awareness, the quiet moment when you realize something inside you keeps tightening, doesn't come from nowhere. It usually belongs to people who try to live with care. You're the kind of person who listens all the way through. You pause before reacting. You replay conversations, not to judge others, but to see where you might have done better. After a tense exchange, you don't feel angry right away. You feel reflective. You wonder if your tone was off, if you asked for too much, if you should have chosen different words. You might be standing in line for coffee, staring at the menu without seeing it, your mind stuck on one sentence someone said hours ago. Or sitting in your car with the engine off, hands still on the wheel thinking, I didn't mean to make things difficult. This is how it often begins, not with cruelty, not with shouting, but with a slow turning inward, where every uncomfortable feeling becomes evidence against yourself. There's a reason this happens so often to people who are kind. You were likely taught that harmony matters, that being easy to work with is a virtue, that good relationships require compromise, sometimes even self-sacrifice. In Buddhist language, there's a simple idea called mindfulness. It means being aware of what is happening inside you without judgment. But many people were never taught mindfulness. They were taught self-correction instead. So when tension appears, your mind doesn't ask, what just happened here? It asks, what did I do wrong? You start adjusting, softening your words, explaining more than necessary, apologizing for things that don't quite feel like mistakes. And slowly, almost invisibly, your inner world begins to shrink. Here's the part no one tells you clearly enough. Feeling responsible for everyone's emotional comfort is not emotional maturity. It's emotional overextension. People with strong boundaries can still be compassionate, but people without boundaries often confuse compassion with self-erasure. This is why you can walk away from certain interactions feeling oddly tired, even when nothing bad happened. Your nervous system was working overtime trying to keep the peace. The problem is not that you care too much. The problem is that you learn to aim that care almost exclusively inward, especially when something feels off. And when you do that long enough, you stop trusting the quiet signals that were meant to protect you. That's not a personal failure. It's a learned pattern. And once you recognize it, you can begin to change it, gently, without becoming hard, cold, or closed off. Because the goal was never to stop being a good person. The goal is to stop disappearing inside your own goodness. There's a moment when that pattern becomes impossible to ignore. You notice it not because someone says something cruel, but because of what lingers afterward. the tightness in your chest, the mental fog, the way your confidence seems to dim just a little after certain conversations. At some point, you start searching for language, not to accuse anyone, but to understand yourself. And this is where naming the phenomenon matters, carefully. What's happening here isn't about bad people or villains. It's about a pattern of emotional influence that quietly shifts responsibility away from one person and places it onto another. In simple terms, it's emotional manipulation. But that word is often misunderstood. Manipulation doesn't always look intentional. It doesn't always come with malice. Sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's unconscious, sometimes it's learned behavior passed down through families, workplaces, or relationships where power and closeness get tangled. You feel it when reality starts to blur. You remember agreeing to something one way, yet somehow you're now questioning your own memory. You express discomfort and suddenly you're reassuring the other person. You set a small limit and the air in the room changes, heavy and unspoken. Nothing is said outright, but something is implied. In Buddhist teaching, there's a concept called avidya, ignorance. Not ignorance as stupidity, but as not seeing clearly. When awareness is clouded, suffering grows quietly. Emotional manipulation thrives in that fog. Here's the deeper truth. The harm doesn't come from the specific words spoken. It comes from the internal shift that follows, when you stop trusting your own perception and start outsourcing your sense of reality. That's the turning point. Healthy relationships, even difficult ones, don't leave you feeling disoriented. They may bring discomfort, but they also bring clarity. You can disagree and still feel grounded in who you are. Manipulative dynamics do the opposite. They make you feel responsible for maintaining emotional balance that was never yours alone to hold. And here's what's important. You don't need to diagnose anyone. You don't need to label a parent, a partner, a coworker as toxic. Labels often create more distance, not understanding. What you do need is awareness. When you begin to notice how consistently you feel smaller, more confused, or more self-doubting around certain people, that awareness becomes wisdom. In Buddhism, wisdom is not about judging the world. It's about seeing things as they are. And when you start seeing clearly, something powerful happens. You stop arguing with your own experience. You stop explaining away your discomfort. You begin to trust the quiet signals that were always there. This isn't about blame, it's about clarity. And clarity is the beginning of freedom. Clarity changes everything. Once you stop arguing with your own experience, your attention naturally turns inward, not in self-blame, but in quiet observation. You begin to notice the moment after, the silence when the conversation ends, the walk back to your car, the pause before you open your front door. Nothing dramatic is happening on the outside, but inside, something is either settling or tightening. With some people, you feel steady afterward. Even if the conversation was difficult, you feel grounded in who you are. Your breath comes back naturally. Your thoughts move forward. With others, there's a different aftermath. Your shoulders stay tense. Your mind keeps replaying small details. You feel the urge to explain yourself again, even though no one is asking. This is the sign most people are never taught to notice. It's not what was said. It's not whether you won the conversation. It's what your inner state looks like when the interaction is over. In Buddhist practice, there's an idea called sati, mindful awareness. It means paying attention to what arises within you without immediately trying to fix it or push it away. When you apply that awareness here, a pattern becomes visible. Healthy connections leave your nervous system relatively calm. There may be discomfort, even disagreement, but there is also clarity. You still recognize yourself. Unhealthy dynamics create internal noise, confusion, self-doubt, a subtle pressure to make things right, even when nothing clearly went wrong. This happens because your inner compass is being gently overridden. Instead of trusting your own sense of reality, you begin scanning the other person for cues. Are they upset? Did you disappoint them? Should you reach out again, just to smooth things over? That constant scanning is not intuition, it's vigilance, and vigilance is exhausting. Here's the deeper truth that rarely gets said out loud. Your emotions are not weaknesses, they are data. That heaviness you feel afterward is not a character flaw. It's information about a relational imbalance. When a dynamic consistently leaves you feeling smaller, more careful, more uncertain of your own voice, Something is off, even if you can't yet explain it in words. You don't need to confront anyone to know this. You don't need proof or permission. You only need to notice the direction your inner world moves in their presence, toward expansion or contraction, toward calm or confusion, toward self-trust or self-doubt. This principle is simple, but it's not easy because it asks you to honor your experience before you explain it away. And once you learn to do that, your relationships start sorting themselves naturally, not through force, not through drama, but through awareness. Because when you trust what happens inside you, you stop giving your power away. One conversation at a time. A familiar situation, but one most people overlook. Once you start paying attention to what happens inside you, everyday moments begin to look different. Not dramatic moments, ordinary ones. Picture this. It's a Tuesday evening. You've had a long day. Your phone buzzes while you're reheating dinner. It's someone you care about. Maybe a coworker, maybe a friend. They ask for a favor, not a big one. Your body answers before your mouth does. You feel tired. You don't really have the capacity tonight, so you pause and say calmly, "I can't tonight." There's a brief silence on the line, not angry, not loud, just heavy. They respond, "Oh, okay." And then, almost as an afterthought, "I just thought you'd understand." You hang up. And that's where the moment most people miss begins. You're standing in your kitchen, the microwave humming softly, and your chest feels tight. You replay the tone of your voice. You wonder if you sounded cold. You think about texting back to explain, not because you changed your mind, but because you don't want them to feel bad. Your food gets cold while your mind keeps negotiating. This is the moment that matters. Nothing objectively wrong happened. You were honest, you were respectful. Yet inside there's pressure. Here's the subtle shift. And it's everything. In the past, you might have sent that follow-up message. You might have softened your boundary with a long explanation. You might have apologized for needing rest, but this time, you don't. You notice the discomfort instead of rushing to fix it. You breathe. You let the feeling be there without acting on it. In Buddhist practice, this is close to upekkha, equanimity, not indifference, but the ability to stay steady when emotions arise without being pulled into reaction. That small pause is the change. You don't harden, you don't withdraw. You simply stop abandoning yourself to manage someone else's disappointment. And something interesting happens. The guilt peaks and then fades. Your body settles. Your sense of self comes back online. Later, one of two things usually follows. Either the relationship adjusts, the other person accepts your boundary, maybe awkwardly at first, but with respect, or the discomfort returns again and again in similar moments, clearer now, impossible to ignore. Both outcomes are information. This is the difference a small shift in response creates. Not confrontation, not explanation, just presence. You're no longer asking, how do I make this okay for them? You're asking, can I stay okay with myself? That question changes everything. Because when you stop rushing to relieve discomfort that isn't yours to carry, you begin building a quiet kind of strength. Not loud, not aggressive, just honest. And honesty, practiced gently and consistently, reshapes your life in ways you don't see at first, but you feel deeply over time. A small shift in how you respond with a big impact mounts. That quiet strength you felt the moment you chose not to fix the discomfort is where practice begins. Not with confrontation, not with long explanations, but with a subtle change in direction. Here is the practice, simple, but not easy. The next time you notice that familiar pull, the urge to explain, to smooth things over, to make sure everyone is okay, pause. Not outwardly, inwardly. Feel your feet on the ground. Notice your breath. Let the sensation pass through you without acting on it. Then respond in a way that is clear, brief, and kind, without adding emotional cushioning. I can't do that. That doesn't work for me. I'm not available. No apology, no story, no justification. At first, this will feel uncomfortable. Your body may tense. Your mind may rush in with warnings. This is rude. They'll think you don't care. You're going to hurt the relationship. That discomfort is not danger. It's withdrawal from an old habit. In Buddhist teaching, there is the idea of tanha, craving. Not only craving for pleasure, but craving for relief. The relief of making things smooth, the relief of being liked, the relief of escaping tension. When you don't immediately relieve that craving, something new happens. You stay present, you stay honest, you stay with yourself. And then you watch. You watch how the other person responds when you don't overfunction emotionally. Do they adjust? Do they respect the limit, even if it takes a moment? Or do they push, guilt, withdraw, or escalate? This is not a test you announce. It's an observation you make quietly. Because the goal is not to change anyone else. The goal is to gather clear information without losing yourself in the process. Here's the deeper shift. You stop measuring your goodness by how little space you take up. You stop confusing calmness with compliance. You learn that kindness does not require self-betrayal. This practice doesn't make you cold, it makes you consistent. Over time, people who can meet you in that consistency will stay. They may stumble at first, but they'll find their footing. People who rely on your over-explaining and over-giving may struggle. Not because you became unkind, but because the dynamic changed. Both outcomes serve your clarity. You don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to prove your point. You don't need to win. You only need to stay aligned with what you feel and what you say. That alignment is power, quiet power, the kind that doesn't demand anything, but changes everything. And with practice, that power stops being something you try to hold. It becomes something you live, returning to yourself and choosing peace. When you stay aligned with what you feel and what you say, something quiet begins to settle inside you. Not certainty about other people, but steadiness within yourself. You start to notice the difference in how you move through the day. Conversations don't echo as long in your head. Your shoulders drop more easily. You spend less time rehearsing what you should have said, and more time living the moment you're actually in. This is what returning to yourself feels like. It doesn't mean every relationship suddenly becomes easy. It means you stop measuring your worth by how well you manage other people's emotions. You stop abandoning your inner truth just to keep things smooth on the surface. In Buddhist teaching, there is the idea of right view, seeing clearly, not perfectly, just clearly enough to stop causing unnecessary suffering, especially to yourself. Choosing peace is not a dramatic decision. It's made in small moments. It's made when you trust the heaviness in your chest instead of explaining it away, when you honor your fatigue instead of apologizing for it, when you let a pause exist without rushing to fill it. Over time, this choice reshapes your life. Some relationships deepen. They grow more honest, more balanced, more real. Others loosen their grip. Not with explosions or accusations, but with clarity. You simply stop shrinking to fit spaces that were never meant to hold you. This is not loss, it's alignment. And alignment creates room. Room for conversations that don't leave you doubting yourself. Room for people who respect your limits without needing a performance. Room for a nervous system that can finally rest. If there's one thing to carry with you from this, let it be this. You are not here to earn peace by erasing yourself. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to need rest. You are allowed to say no without carrying guilt home with you. If this message resonated, sit with it for a moment. Notice where in your life you've been overriding your own signals. And the next time you feel that familiar pull to explain or apologize, try something different, just once. Stay with yourself. If you feel moved, share a line from this that stayed with you. Leave a comment, not to impress anyone, but to name your own clarity. And if you'd like to continue exploring this kind of inner strength and emotional clarity together, you're welcome to stay. May you choose peace, not because the world becomes gentle, but because you learn to be gentle with yourself.